Welcome back to State and Local. I'm Anne Marie Battistone, and my guest today is William O'Donnell. He's the Register of Deeds for Norfolk County. I'm very pleased to have him here because he's going to talk about a whole bunch of initiatives that they've done for anti-fraud and different information about different kinds of mortgages and all the different things that the registry does that a lot of people just probably are not aware of. So I'm so glad to have you come
Anne
here.
Marie,
Thank you.
you very much. Thanks, and thank Norfolk Cable for having me out here in Norfolk.
Now, I wanted to just, and how did you come to be the Register?
Well, believe it or not, I've been there 15 years, and politics was always a little bit of a hobby. I went to school down Washington, D.C. I went to Xaverian Brothers High School in Westwood.
Where'd you go in D.C.?
Yeah, I grew up in Norwood. I went to Georgetown University.
Oh, okay.
And worked for then Congressman Joe Moakley for 3 years. So I did get a sense of public service. I believe in public service. And then I came home to Boston College, law school. And much like people, afterwards, I was young. I ran for planning board. And in Norwood, we have elected town meeting, ran for that. So, I kind of try to combine public service with what I like about the Registry of Deeds is that, I believe in public service. I was an assistant district attorney for then District Attorney Bill Delahunt. Oh. But I've also been in the private sector. I'm an attorney by training and had my own practice, and you have bills to pay and employees pay to meet. And so what I've tried to do is at the Registry of Deeds take some of the things I've learned in government locally and also in the private sector and apply it to the Registry of Deeds, which is an arm of government, like you said, many people don't know about. But when you think about it, the biggest asset most of us have are our homes, and that's what the registry deals with.
Now tell me a little bit about that Homestead Act and the status that it affords you.
Sure. Well, the homestead is one of the many community land records that get recorded at the Registry of Deeds. The Registry of Deeds, that's where the mission of the registry is probably the same as it was when Norfolk County was founded back in 1793. The register back then probably said, hey, I want to make sure the records are recorded accurately, efficiently, securely, and that the community can rely on the records, because the real estate's a very big part of the economy. And the homestead is one of the many documents that gets recorded at the registry. I really call it a consumer protection aspect that people should take advantage of. It's a creature of the state legislature in Chapter 188. It's been written in the past, and it protects people. How does it protect people? Well, in the past, you had to declare an estate a homestead, and you can only do it for your principal residence. And it's a relatively simple form to fill out.
I did do it.
Yeah, you just get your reference. You might own your property. 80% of Norfolk County is in the recorded land side. It's book and page. 20% is the land court or registered land. It's by certificate of title. You make a reference to that, and you get it notarized, and the filing fee, again, set by the state legislature, is relatively minor compared to other fees. It's $36. And what does it do? It puts a picket fence around the house so that there's not a forced sale. Now, if you don't pay taxes to Norfolk, the town can go by tax taking even if you have a homestead. Or if you don't pay your mortgage, the bank can foreclose on you even if you have a homestead. But the best example I give people is many people drive and they think they have a lot of insurance on their car, say $100,000, but they hit somebody in the crosswalk, injure that party badly. Maybe it's a $400,000 case. Well, the lawyer that's advocating for that injured party, your insurance company will probably pay the $100,000 fairly quickly. They will look to your assets to satisfy that case. And in this case, again, for your principal residence, it really, they're still going to chase you for the money, but they can't force the sale of your house.
I see.
And as I said, I was an attorney by training.
They could sue you personally, though.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And you talk to 10 different attorneys. A lot of times you get 10 different opinions on various subjects, but I'd say 9.9 out of 10 would advocate that you should have a homestead recorded. Hopefully you'll never need it. And it runs with the land. So if you're living in a house in Norfolk and you have a homestead, but you go to downsize, maybe you sell the house and go to a smaller house or condo, you have to record a homestead. So it goes with the land, and it's good. And look, if someone's lucky enough to be 18 years old and owns that piece of property and it's their principal residence, they really should consider putting a homestead on.
Now, what about the elderly? Because I was wondering if I need to redo mine because I'm over 65 or 62. In either case.
Well, you point out there is, in the statute, the state legislators have defined elderly as 62 and above, and so there's a separate homestead. And it really depends on the situation. I know a lot of elderly people that own it with someone else, say their significant other. If both of them are over 62, they put a homestead on because there's some indications in the new statute that the $500,000 is for one and the other $500,000 is for the other, and it's kind of stacked. Well, they've used the term, it protects $500,000 worth of equity in the house.
Oh, okay.
And it's always being looked at by the state legislature because when I first started as register, it was $300,000. And I think for all intents and purposes, I know some people might have more equity than $500,000. You don't see judges, I think they know the intent of the law, and the intent of the law is to protect people's principal residence. So even houses that might have more equity than that, it seems that the judges respect what the intent of the law is that that house, if it's your principal residence and you have a homestead on, isn't to be used to kind of in a forced sale situation. And there's other benefits to the homestead which have been put into the statute by your local state representatives and state senators. For instance, if you have a homestead recorded and you go to sell your house, the proceeds of the sale are protected, again, for a limited period of time. So creditors can't come in and swoop in for 1 year, for a purchase and sale. And just say your house burnt down and the insurance company issued a casualty insurance check. The proceeds of that check, your creditors can't come in and swoop in for that money because the intent is they want you to, hopefully build the house back up. And if you have a homestead recorded, that check is protected for 2 years. So there's all these little protections that have been built in if you have a homestead. And the legislature should be commended because they've expanded it. Before, there was some case law in the land court that if you had a property in trust, you couldn't put a homestead on. Well, the legislators have changed that. So depending on certain situations, depending on who the beneficiaries are, again, who's living in the property as a principal residence, but at least they've made it okay, or they've allowed now, if properties are in trust, that you can at least consider putting a homestead on.
Because I was going to ask you about that because I put the homestead on when I first bought it, but then I subsequently put the house in trust. So do I need to do anything?
Well, in past, that would be considered a separate transaction. For instance, sometimes a husband and wife would have a homestead on, and then the husband and wife would transfer it, for different reasons. Say to the, just put it in the wife's name. A lot of lawyers would advocate, well, that's a separate transaction. If you put it back in the husband and wife's name, maybe you should put another homestead on. It's something to look at. If you've put it in trust,
I have.
Then the trust now can look at putting a homestead on. And it really depends. A lot of times, and I always say I'm not an expert in estate planning. Go to the experts in estate planning to get advice and guidance on that. But there's a lot of good things that have gone on with the homestead. I don't think it's a disadvantage to have it on. And many times people cancel their homestead and they didn't even know it. When you refinanced, there was no one reads the 30 pages in the mortgage that you're signing, but there was a one sentence in there. Some would argue that it only terminated your homestead for that transaction. I personally, I had a very similar situation. I have 3 children, and the youngest is now in college. The other 2 have graduated. But when you're refinancing to pay bills and things like that, I said, hey, could you take that out? Well, of course, the banks have attorneys. They don't take it out. But it terminated my homestead, in my opinion. And I didn't want a chance that my homestead would, 20 years from now, if I got into a situation that someone would say, well, when you refinance back when your kids were in college, your homestead got terminated. The good thing the legislature has done is they've put language in that if there's language in there that terminates your homestead, it doesn't terminate your homestead. That statute went into effect March 16, 2011.
Huh.
But you should look before March 16, 2011 if you've done a few things. Because the last thing, I think the legislature should be commended because, they listen to groups. I'm a member of the Registers of Deeds Association, and you try to advocate for the residents and the consumers, and I think they listen saying, wait a minute, this is an unintended consequence. Most people, when they refinance, don't think that they're jeopardizing their homestead.
So you don't, as far as you know, it's not nullified by putting the house in a trust.
I would get some advice. I would think it is because when you were an individual when you put the homestead on, and now you're in, now the property went into trust, so it's another transaction.
Huh.
So you should take a look at it. It doesn't hurt to have it on. Some people who have retained life estates in their property, they've put homesteads on.
So we just redo it or call up?
Yeah, I would call and get some advice on that.
I could call your office. Would anybody be able to tell me?
Well, I would call whoever you went for estate planning. We have office hours. That's the beauty of a lot of the modernization initiatives. We get out and bring our computers and we can look up all this information. We have office hours. We've been at Norfolk Town Hall. We've gone out to different groups, different senior centers, and try to help people. We're really not supposed to be giving legal advice. When it gets to trusts, I really tell people you really want to go to whoever set up the trust for you, get some advice. But that's been a change in the law. So you just go and say, hey, I heard that if it's in trust, and just because it's in trust doesn't mean you're eligible to put a homestead on. It really depends on who the beneficiaries might not be living in the house. Some people, the beneficiaries are the kids, and they're not living in the house. So it's something to look at. The big thing is, for most people, they haven't done the sophisticated estate planning that's in trust. For most people who are probably watching your show, take a look at having a homestead on. You probably own it with your significant other or own it by yourself. Take steps to protect your property because it is the biggest asset most of us have.
Now, that sounds pretty good that you go around, you have these sort of office hours around. How do people find out about that schedule? On the website?
Well, the towns are very good. They can go on our website. Our website, www.norfolkdeeds.org. There's a couple of aspects of our website. One we can get into. It's about the research. It's about the records, and it's about a big part of the economy, real estate. People do research to rely on the records, but we also try to use it as an information-based tool where they can see where we are at town halls. And the local towns do a great job. Norfolk does a great job when we come in about putting it on, getting notices out and things like that. And we try to notify the papers as well. But on our website, there's good information. If you're a first-time home buyer, go on our website. We have information for first-time home buyers. Every community, doesn't matter whether you're in a nice community like Norfolk, it doesn't matter. We have 28 communities in Norfolk County. Every community has had someone struggling with foreclosure. If you go on our website, we have a section there for foreclosure assistance. We've partnered up with a couple of nonprofit groups, Neighbor Works of Southern Massachusetts.
And what do they do?
And Quincy Community Action Program. Well, if you reach out to them, what I like is they're nonprofit. They don't charge people. They help people out when people are, get a notice that that someone's at least initiated foreclosure proceedings in court.
Meaning the bank or
the lender.
The lender, rather.
Yeah. These groups will, in some ways, educate the people. For one thing, a lot of them have a lot of great programs on financial literacy, how to balance the checkbook. They also do a lot of analysis. What got you into this situation? Sometimes it's just bad luck. You might have lost your job,
right,
or you might have had a sickness where, there's some bills that need to be paid. What's good about getting advice is sometimes people wait till they're auctioning the house, and that's too late. Mm-hmm. If you know anyone in that situation, have them go on our website, have them try to get in contact with these groups, because they really give people guidance and help. They try to help the people stay in the home. They also have that tough conversation if maybe they have to transition to something else. So I think there are two groups, those two groups, that nonprofit and I think their mission is really to try to help the people that are kind of struggling, and we all struggle at different times. So
and they work for all of Norfolk County.
Yes, they've in partnering up, they've said that they would, whether it's out in the western part of the county here in Norfolk, that they would, help people out, and that's the feedback I've gotten is that they have. So it's Neighbor Works of Southern Massachusetts and Quincy Community Action Program. And we also have links to the Attorney General's office that also
And they
has
would
some
be
help.
on your website too.
Yes.
Those two.
So that's what I'm saying. Our website is kind of information based. There's a lot of good information, and then through our modernization efforts, I'm probably most proud that on our website we have internet land record research. So if you go back to book 1, page 1, the first document from 1793, you can view from your home.
Is that right?
Yeah, what
Is
we're
that
trying
like a microfiche, or what do you?
Well, what we did is
That
we
was
used
years
some of the
ago.
microfilm to cut over, but the scanning equipment, and it started bringing in a new document management system, a new computer system, and that kind of really allowed us to run it like a business, just professionally as far as on the operation end. But it also allowed us, and it didn't happen overnight, it's taken a while before we were back to the 1990s and the 1970s and then the 1950s. You just work your way backwards, scanning the documents in, because we have over 6 million images in this library. And a good thing we've done is, as I said, if you enter book 1, page 1, the first document from 1793 can come up on your computer. So we're trying to bring the registry records into people's homes and businesses. And you can go on our website and you can learn how to do some research. Again, on our website, we have computer seminars. We open up the building to the public in the spring and in the fall.
Now, where would that be?
We're located, great question, at 649 High Street in Dedham. It's
yes.
across from the Gold Dome Superior Court. And usually at 4:30, we have a little class, that's open to anyone from the public, so they can sign up. We get good feedback on it, and and by the end, the people are kind of looking up their own information.
How to
We give them
research these records?
Research the records, and we have a handout, and a lot of people just interested in doing it. And the records, we're trying to make them even more relevant, because from 1793 to 1900, they were all handwritten.
Right.
The Register in 1900 was probably talking about his modernization initiative. They started typing the documents, and they're easier to read. So when I was looking at how hard it was to read, I'm a big believer in history. The lawyers liked it because, let's face it, a big part of the economy is the real estate economy. And when they have to do research, I said, how can we make it a little easier? So we started transcribing all those documents from 1793 to 1900. It was over 450,000 documents have been transcribed. But now more and more people are doing genealogical and historical research.
Yes,
so
yes.
There's a lot of good history in Norfolk County. We've had 4 presidents born here in Norfolk County.
Right.
John Adams, John Quincy Adams, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and George Bush Sr. So there's a lot of history. So my whole thing was, well, you can't make history come alive if you can't read it. And that was really kind of the basis for trying to transcribe the documents, just making it easier to read. But I mentioned my youngest is in college, but I noticed when he was graduated high school 3 years ago, a lot of his contemporary, I went to St. Catherine's in Norwood. You learned penmanship.
Yes, you did.
A lot
Public
of people
school,
don't.
too.
Yeah, they don't know cursive anymore, and
they can't read it.
I'm afraid a few generations from now, those records, if we left them
Exactly.
handwritten, people wouldn't at least. Again, the legal record is the handwritten one. But people wouldn't be able to read it, so that's another issue for another day. But so we're always trying to fine-tune our computer system so that to make it user-friendly and customer-oriented. And our records go back to 1793, and we're just completing a complete index of it. So before, when we first started, it went. If you ran Bill O'Donnell, every Bill O'Donnell back to 1970 would come up. And then we worked our way back to 1900. Well, we're back to 1793 now. So if you ran if you put your name in, my name, Bill O'Donnell, it would all pop out back to 1793. It just makes it easier to research. So
now, who went in and looked at those old documents? Because they made the letters, apart from it being cursive, they made the letters differently.
And it's kind of interesting, when we went back through it, they had their own almost forms. the scrivener had handwritten out the form and then would just plug in the name. So people, kind of got to, and the F's and the S's kind of got through it. And the big thing is it was just a fun project to do. I think it augments the business end of it, the engineers that use it, the brokers, or especially the real estate lawyers and the title examiners that have to issue titles. But we're seeing more and more historical societies, commissions, genealogical people really taking an interest in the old documents. And I know we're talking a lot about the modernization, like with the computers, but my dad, who's going to be 87 in February, he climbed poles for the Boston Edison for 38 years.
Oh.
But when you're talking about work way back, all this, I remember he said, hey, listen, some of us don't know anything about computers, don't want to know anything about computers, don't care to know anything about computers. So, we have done a lot of modernization initiatives, but we created a customer service center. So if anybody has a question, or you can call our number, 781-461-6101. We have staff and computers there where, they're there to assist people who either walk in at 649 High Street in Dedham or call in and try to help them out, whether hey, do you have a homestead recorded? Or if your mortgage has been paid off, was a discharge recorded?
That's
different
another
things
thing.
like
Now,
that.
I don't know whether mine was or not. Is that some part of the papers they're supposed to give you from the bank? Or
Well,
what's
it's a great question, and people forget. See, I'm a big believer in community banks, the smaller banks. And we probably should start out what a mortgage discharge is. When you borrow money, whether it's a regular mortgage or an equity line, documents get recorded at the registry. A mortgage gets recorded in your name, telling the world you owe that money. When the money gets paid off, everyone's happy. They get all this paperwork back from the bank, notes, canceled notes, everything. You've been paid off. What's been happening more and more, and they've gotten better at it. We were part of the Registers of Deeds Association was part of a lawsuit with the Attorney General against some of the bigger banks. See, I think some of the bigger banks, people forget in 2008, 2009, when the economy got in trouble, some of these bigger banks, and we still see stories of it today. They don't always follow the rules, And what happened is, mortgage discharges weren't getting recorded. What's a mortgage discharge? That's a 1 or 2 page document that tells the world that your mortgage has been paid off. And we started seeing people coming in saying, hey, I'm selling my house. I paid this thing off 20 years ago, but the lawyer's saying I need a mortgage discharge. How do I get it? Well, again, being a believer in community banks, if you went to the local community bank, they probably give you great customer service. Look up the document, look up to see that you paid it off. The bank president or the bank vice president is probably around the corner. They draft up the 1 page or 2 page document that's a discharge and give you the discharge, and then you're on your way. You can get it to the closing attorney or get it recorded. We're seeing, especially with, people forget, in the 1990s, some banks went out of business. Other banks have merged. So we have on our website,
and they sell the mortgages too, right?
The mortgage is transferred with them, but we have a document that you can look up on our website, Where Has My Bank Gone?, where we give you state and federal contact information, where you can reach out to these government agencies that will help you.
Even out of state.
To help you track down who did that bank become. And the reason you have to do that is it's a paper chase. You're trying to chase a discharge. Now, the banks have gotten better at it. And sometimes, in fairness to the banks, they would send a discharge to the consumer, but just didn't make it clear to the consumer that discharge had to get recorded. A lot of times, especially those bigger banks, said they.
So the owner has to go and record it.
Well, what they should do, I always tell people you should check with the attorney that did the closing. Maybe it's sitting in that file. And then if not there, go to the lender. But a lot of times it's 10 years ago, and some of these banks have merged, and you got to chase it because ultimately it's your property. So here you are trying to sell the house, and I always tell people, look this stuff up before you're on the eve of selling the house. These are just little title issues that can come up, and and sometimes it's not an insurmountable problem, but people that have gone through it know what I'm talking about. It's not always easy trying to, especially with the larger institutions, trying to get a customer service, someone to make a decision, and someone to get you the paperwork.
On the other hand, would the smaller banks be able to go back a few decades or a couple of decades?
Yes. I think the smaller bank, they have the records. They can see. I just think sometimes that's the advantage of those smaller community banks. They just give you better customer service, and hopefully the bigger banks will catch up to the smaller banks in that regard. But to my way of thinking, the consumer, it has to be taken care of. And, ultimately the poor consumer, it might be sitting in some attorney's file, or the bank never sent it to them, or it's sitting, it never got processed at the bank. But ultimately it's my property, so I'm trying to sell my house. I gotta kind of straighten it out, which is too bad. But at least by shows like this, just making the consumers aware of some issues like that, they can either go online and check to see if the discharge has been recorded, or they could call our customer service center up and say, hey, can you just check?
I'm going to do
see?
that because.
And we do that at office hours. That's in our outreach program. And
I never knew they came to Norfolk. I never knew you all
sure.
came. How often do you come to Norfolk?
There's 28 communities, so we do once a year, to the town halls, and then I've been to the Grange for the Norfolk Lions. We get other groups invite us, whether the senior centers or some of the community organizations. I've spoken.
So you need to be invited, or is it a matter of course that you come out?
I don't, but some of the veterans associations, the legions, we go in and hey, what's going on at the registry, and we bring our computer equipment, and hey, can I get a copy of my deed or things like that? But we've been. There's 28 communities, and we try to get out in all of them. And the town halls have been wonderful. They let us, we in Norfolk, they let us use the selectman's office there, and where they meet, and we people come in and we try to help them out.
Now, what about the anti-fraud initiatives?
Yes, we were the first registry in Massachusetts to do this. It's called the Consumer Notification Anti-Fraud Program, and again, I haven't seen any fraud, but that doesn't mean it's not. It's all around us. The FBI actually says that white-collar fraud through property, mortgage fraud, deed fraud, property fraud is one of the fastest-growing white-collar crimes out there, and I know it's taking place out west, so it's just a matter of time.
How does it happen?
Well, at least what we've tried to set up here in Norfolk County is you could sign up for an email, and just so your viewers know, I signed up myself, and I get an email. Any William O'Donnell gets recorded, it sends me an email. Now I'm William, Patrick O'Donnell, but I get an email. Hey, this document was recorded. It could be for William J. O'Donnell. It could be any variation of William O'Donnell. I get an email. I don't find that totally inconvenient. So I get the email, and I because I can look it up, it doesn't pertain to me. There may be a time where I get an email and all of a sudden I look at that document, because it's all online, or you can call us if you need some help. Say, wait a minute, that's my house. I didn't sign that. Or that's a mortgage to my house. I didn't sign that. Now, it's not going to prevent the fraud, Anne Marie, but it will get people, you can get on it sooner. We have links to the law enforcement agencies around Norfolk County.
What exactly happens when you say it's not your house? What did they done?
Someone forged a mortgage or an equity line. They forged a document.
On your house? To get a mortgage?
Well, that's what's happening. That's what's happening elsewhere. That there's all kinds of different. I mean, look what's going on with people's credit cards. I can't pretend to even keep up with a lot of the people. But having worked in the district attorney's office, there's always people that are trying to take advantage of others and hurt people. So wonder if all of a sudden I see an equity line that I didn't sign. Well, someone might have done something where, equity line, they might get $100,000, they can write $100,000 check on it.
Now, isn't the bank or the lender supposed to search that out?
Oh, there's any number. Look, if everything was perfect, we wouldn't be seeing all these frauds, and there's always a way to beat the system. And I'm not saying actually, I know I'm not saying that we're going to beat these people that are trying to perpetuate fraud. All I'm saying is, if a situation comes along,
well, that's a good
you're
thing
at
to
least going to
have.
get notified. It didn't prevent the fraud. We're
Right,
not
I understand. Right,
but
right.
it gets you like, hey, wait a minute, that's my property. Now, you know, there are things that happen. You know, there are things, all kinds of abuses
Or
can
even
take
within
place
the
in any
family, if
system.
somebody wanted to pretend there's somebody else, and
Well, you know, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. You know, you could have, you know, mom might own the property theoretically with the brothers and sisters, and next thing, you know, well, wait a minute, what happened here? You know, so yeah, you know, just yeah, there's all kinds of. There's probably a lot of motivations why people might want to sign up, but to me, you get an email most of the time, at least in my case, all the time, it doesn't involve me, you know. But that one time,
Gee, that's
it
good
does.
to know.
Yeah, it's so you could go on our website, you can sign up, you don't have to call, you can go on our website, and yeah, it's the consumer notification and the anti-fraud program, and it's just a
now, do you
good
try to
protection.
do you think elderly are more targeted to that, or do you offer more fraud advice to the elderly, or is it pretty much across the board?
Well,
that think
you know,
everybody-
I think it does. You know, I think anybody can be taken advantage of. It doesn't matter your age. I do know, for instance, on the homesteads, there was a letter going around to the elderly for $15. They would provide you a form. Now, if you go on our website, you could download the homestead form free. But don't pay $15 for a form they didn't even fill out for you. It's a blank form. We've seen deed scams, and I don't think they necessarily, they target everybody from what I see. And what's a deed scam? Well, when I first started, it was a group. If you went on their website, you would think you couldn't get up in the morning unless you had a certified copy of your deed. So they send letters to people saying, for $60, they'll get you a certified copy of your deed. Now, it's good to have a certified copy of your deed, but believe me, when you go to sell your house, if you didn't have a certified copy of your deed, the professionals that are involved in the transaction are going to come to the registry either in person or virtually through the internet and look up the information. So this group was getting people for $60 a certified copy of your deed that at most would cost $2 by coming directly to the registry.
Oh.
Now, there's the variation of
that's
that
not
scam.
technically illegal, is it?
No, because in fine print they put this is a solicitation, and it's continued. Recently, you know, Hank Philippi Ryan from Channel 7 was at the registry and did a story on this just recently. The new group, they send out what looks like a tax bill, and they call it a processing fee for $83. And they offer other things that, for instance, the tax rate. Well, you can get your tax rate by calling up your local assessor,
Right.
Or the property
Right.
value, and they get you a copy of your deed. But and again, the prior Attorney General's been notified, the new Attorney General's been notified, the Secretary of State, they've put out consumer alerts. They say it's legal because sometimes in the fine print it's very hard to read.
Yes, oh yeah.
And it may be legal, but it's great coming on shows like this just to spread the word because it's not right. And you just want people to be aware. You know, so these scams don't just target elderly. You know, maybe I think they target everybody. And sometimes people get a bill and they're like, oh, I got to pay this thing. And it doesn't matter your age.
Now, do they send that out by mail? Like a bulk
yeah, a lot
mailing?
about by mail. That's seemingly.
Gee, it seems like, boy, that's
Yeah,
$60.
Well, and what's good, you know, hey, it was, like I said, it was just on Channel 7, but Boston Herald did a story on it, and WBZ Radio came in, did a story on it. So you just keep spreading the word because it may be legal, but it's still happening. And you know, just I think in fact, just when I was leaving today, a resident dropped off a solicitation she got, much like the person that
And these are different
spoke
companies.
at the Channel 7. This one's the same. It's two different companies. That one did the certified copy scam, and now this one is, it's not a certified. It's just a copy. At least the other company certified it. This one just sends you a copy. It's not even certified.
Now, I remember going into the old building in Dedham. Is it still the same way inside? I don't know why I went personally, but I did.
Well, it's still
22 years ago.
And again, we might talk about how we've computerized, and we do have over 45 computers sprinkled around the building. So that building is open to everybody. It's at 649 High Street, so it's not
Still
just
all
for
the old wood inside and the
yeah, it's not just for the engineers or title examiners or the real estate brokers. It's for everyone can come in. But it was opened in 1903, so there's always been a registry in Dedham since 1793. But it's a historical building. We love being there. We've tried to dress it up. We asked each town to send us a flag, so we have all the flags there. And the historical societies and commissions were great. When the probate court left, we went downstairs because there was no place to close. And we still store books. We're one of the few registries that still print books.
Because it seems to me, I remember looking in a book and seeing one of those old, maybe I was just nosing around while I was there, and I remember seeing those old-fashioned.
Well, we have, they're bound. And,
yes.
And so when I started, we were at book 17,000. We're approaching book 36,000. Again, it's probably because a lot of the documents are, 30 pages in a mortgage. But, economy's been busy, and so we still print the books. So I don't want to be the first register to stop printing books. I mean, I feel, I'm glad, I know I've modernized the operation. And again, when I say there's no I in team. I still try to play hockey. I'm getting too old for that. I'm playing with kids I coach. But there's no I in team. I had a great staff that's helped kind of implement
So very
these
costly
visions.
maintaining those books and printing them?
Well, there is a cost to it. Now, once they're on the shelf, presumably, there's big signs you can't steal them and things,
right.
But it is a cost factor. But in some registries, again, there's 21 registries around the state. Some have stopped printing.
And it's just online.
Yeah. Some people still do it the old-fashioned way. And I still like having the books. It's almost, it's almost a form of disaster recovery. And before I get into that, about how I needed space for the books, and then the historical societies and commissions sent historical photos, like old photos, and we blew them up and put them all around, and we grabbed some space so people can do closings at the registry. Before you could, but everyone was fighting for the one table. Now we have tables and rooms where, sometimes people want to just do the closing there so they can go upstairs and, get it recorded and then come down and give the keys and the moving vans can go and things like that. I mentioned disaster recovery in the sense, I feel like protecting the records. When you bought your house, you want to make sure your records are protected. They're all in the books. And I think that's one form of, protecting the records. By law, we still have to microfilm. So every document we've microfilmed.
That's tedious to look through, though, isn't it?
Yes, and that microfilm gets sent to Iron Mountain in Massachusetts and New York. And the reason why that's important, think about the floods in New Orleans or recently in Houston.
Right.
If that flood happened in Dedham and you wiped out all the records, at least we could try to recreate the record. It would be very difficult. Now, everything's on the computer now. We do daily and weekly backups, and those tape drives get sent off-site. We don't store them off-site, and we have a redundant system in another state. So we've tried to take steps to run it like a business, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, that if something happens, the records are protected. And we've tried to be proactive. We were the first registry to put a generator in. So during these snowstorms, yes, a lot of times people can't get in, and we don't make the employees, if the governor says you can't come in. But I live in Norwood, a few of us get in, and we're open for business. If something happens to that, and it's a beautiful historic building, but it's 1903. If something happens to that building, we have a office down the street in Dedham, and it would be a struggle, but we could open the door. We have the computer set up, the scanning equipment, so that we could at least take recordings and get going. It would still be a struggle, but again, trying to think out of the box that, geez, if something happens here, can we get up and running? So that's, other things that we've tried to implement at Norfolk County. Like I mentioned earlier, like trying to run it like a business.
Now we have about 5 minutes. I want to ask you a question. If there were some neighbors that had, I guess the fence had been on the neighbor's property and nobody had cared, somebody bought that property and made a big fuss about the fence, moved the fence, blah, blah, blah. Now, would they have had to have gone into the would they? I said, well, why didn't you just look at the deeds and see?
Well,
so what would they have had to have done?
It really depends. That's why you have to go to a surveyor and get a detailed survey of your property. Now, sometimes,
But isn't that part of the record?
well, yes. What happens is the engineers get the deeds out and off they go. But sometimes these disputes, because remember, some of these old deeds were by the river, by the stone wall, and there's no river, or the stone wall's been moved or something.
Right.
But what would happen is, yes, they would go to the records, and then, one side has their little expert, the surveyor, and it's an expensive process. And another, the opponent might get their own surveyor.
So they would have to get somebody out there based on the records that they could get from
and part of what that surveyor would do, the engineer/surveyor, would be going to the registry records, get the records, try to, and then do a very detailed instrument survey. It gets very involved. But we just take the records at the registry, and then it's for the courts and the experts to kind of interpret what all these records mean. But sometimes in disputes like that, they really should get some advice from an attorney that does real estate litigation, or just get it surveyed and see where it is.
Now, were you originally appointed?
I was appointed, and then it's an elected office.
Oh, so it is elected.
Yeah, it's an elected office. So as I said,
in Norfolk County.
Norfolk County. I grew up in Norwood, in Norfolk County, my whole life. But so there's 28 communities we're out here in the western part, but Norfolk County goes all the way to Brookline. As a matter of fact, people always wonder, why is Brookline by itself? It's because all that land, West Roxbury, Hyde Park, Roxbury, Dorchester, was all part of Norfolk County at one time. They got annexed into the city of Boston, but Brookline always voted to stay by itself.
So how often do you come up for a...
It's a 6-year term.
Oh,
a 6-year term. But again, I've always enjoyed politics, but I also have enjoyed the registry. This is almost more a managerial part of it, and just trying to modernize the operation, because and I think we have done that, and we've implemented things like electronic recording, for instance. That wasn't even around when I first started. Electronic recording, it's been authorized by the state legislature and the federal government that an attorney here in Norfolk could do a closing here in Norfolk and then transmit all the documents over the internet to get recorded at the registry. So, we've been doing it, and just recently we were the first registry to record it on the land court side, because the land court, the legislature and Governor Baker in past January signed into a law that that the registry didn't need to keep the original documents, which opened up the door for electronic recording on the registry, on the land court side. We've been doing it on the registry side, since 2010.
So what's the difference between the land court and the registry? The land court is the court?
Yeah, basically there's 80% of Norfolk County is recorded land, 20% is registered land or land court. The land court's in Boston. We don't have anything to do with the lawsuits there. What we have is someone took the time to register the land. Land court started in Massachusetts in 1899, in Norfolk County 1900. Someone took the time to register the land. So when you come to our building, you go right for recorded land or left for registered land. It's just the deeds are the same. A lot of times the consumers don't know which side they're on, because they really it's something that you didn't know. It's just someone took the time. It's an expensive process, but someone took the time to register the land. It has to get sort of blessed by the land court, and it's done by certificate of title, and it has certain protections. That fence you just mentioned, you can't take property by adverse possession if it's registered land. Whereas if it was recorded land, if someone, say, put that fence up for 21 years and mowed it and owned it, or appeared to own it, they could make a claim that they had taken that land from you. So there's certain hidden protections that people have in registered land in the statutes.
So there's quite a lot. So sounds like that website's a wealth of information. I'm going to go on myself and find out about this homestead and the.
You can look up the information. You can go online. Like I said, there's two parts of the website. It's internet driven, so you could do land record research. But there is other information about a lot about what we talked about: the homestead or the mortgage discharges or foreclosure assistance, first time home buyers. So we try to make it information based as well.
It sounds like you're very friendly. Very friendly to people calling in, and that you've got a lot of contact, a lot of outreach to people because
we strive for that. I mean, customer service.
Really?
I really, maybe some of that was, the days back in Washington working for Congressman Moakley. It's like, hey, help the residents out, these are our customers, our users, and, deliver it in a customer service. You don't want to be stereotypical. We want to have good customer service. And I think, that's the philosophy we try to embrace and try to strive for every day at the registry.
Oh, it sounds like it. Oh, well, listen, thank you very much.
Well,
it was very
Anne Marie,
informative.
Yeah,
oh, thank you.
Thanks
this
very
is our
much for
second
having
time,
me. Yeah,
right?
time has gone by, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the invitation to come out to Norfolk.
Public service to have you come out. I mean, in addition, you're just talking like this. In addition to, having your employees come out and talk to people.
I'm there. No, I come out to those.
Oh, you do?
I come out to the office hours. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you
again. It gets me out of the office,
Take a little trip. Well, thank you for watching State and Local. This is Norfolk Public Access. I'm Anne Marie Battistone, and my guest today was William P. O'Donnell, who is the Register of Deeds in Massachusetts. So thank you for watching. We'll see you again.